All right, this is, we're back. Banks loan money based on collateral. And if the value of the collateral is less, banks will loan you less money. Banks are not in the business of risk. They're in the business of making money. Personally, I think it's there's a lot of nefariousness to the banking industry. One of the things that I would like to see, which is what Michael Bloomberg is definitely talking about, is making it so banks and credit card companies cannot charge you more than 15% of interest rates. And I think that's really important, because do you know that whenever you're at the checkout line at a department store, do you go to department stores?
No.
Have you ever been to a store where they said, hey, we'll give you 10% off of everything you're buying today if you apply for this credit card?
Yes.
What do you say?
I generally don't sign up for any store credit cards.
Right. Have you ever?
Maybe once when I needed to to buy a big purchase, I think I signed up to Restoration Hardware because I had to buy a bunch of stuff for the bar.
Well, do you know that department stores make more money from the interest off of credit cards than they do from the goods that they sell?
I believe it.
Yeah. It's an evil business. That's an evil business. And I think that we need to address things like that. We also need to address things like antitrust. Antitrust laws need to be reformed in order to help stave off this whole situation where a corporation can just buy every single corporation in the world and then become just the one giant corporation. I think that's something that needs to be addressed. There's a lot of things that need to be addressed. And these are all things that my understanding is that Michael Bloomberg is looking at. And these are all his same passions. Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders have never really mentioned any of these things. What they're doing is selling little shiny objects to people that don't have economics degrees, don't have an understanding about how our systems work, don't have an understanding.
That's terrible, Bernie Sanders. He's selling stuff to people who don't have economics degrees.
Right. I'm explaining, and people, yes, is that not true?
Dude, there are people that don't have houses.
True? Exactly.
That don't have food.
That's why they don't understand. That's why they don't understand. That's what I'm talking about. That's what I'm trying to explain to you, that they don't understand what these ideas are doing and what they mean. That's what I'm saying. They don't understand what these policies that are being given to them are actually saying and what they mean. And Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren are taking advantage of that.
In this country, for the last, at least since Ronald Reagan, 1980, 1984, this country has been run by rightists and centrists the whole time. We have never had one left of center president. Finally, for the first time, and this is why all the money's getting scared, we're about to have one. And when they come to office, it's simple. The rich have to pay more in taxes.
They're not talking about them paying more in taxes.
No matter what you say, it's going to hurt you. It's going to hurt the poor. It's going to hurt you. You're still going to have to pay more taxes, and that's going to be beneficial to the poor. Why? Because you're going to get better roads, better bridges.
That's not where that's not where that comes from. I just explained all that.
You're going to get Social Security. You're going to get health care. You're going to get the ability to pay for college. You're going to get...
How are you going to pay for college?
Well, why don't you read their plans?
I did.
Yeah.
What's in there that says they're going to pay for college?
They're going to cancel student debt.
There. That's a travesty.
It's a travesty, right?
Yeah.
Why is it a travesty?
Because when you borrow money, you're making a promise to pay it back, and now all of a sudden the government is going to go and they're going to say, yeah, we're going to cancel it. One way that the government can cancel it is by paying the banks the money. So that comes from taxpayer dollars. So you got to look at the full circle. They're not going to tell
Kids
the
in this
banks.
country are basically starting their lives $50,000, $60,000 in debt before they can even find a job. You think that's good?
Oh, that's terrible.
All right.
That's really bad. And their method of solving that problem is insane. It's absolutely insane. So what happens is when you borrow money from a bank to go to a university, the government basically is guaranteeing that money, because the bank knows that under their systems, they have to abide by what the federal government says they have to do because they're FDIC insured. Every single business is dictated, their rules, regulations, everything is dictated by the insurance company that insures them. So I have got businesses, the insurance guy comes around, he looks and says, oh, I want you to build this, I want you to take that down, I want you to do this, I want you to do that. That'll cost you about $35,000. When can you have that done? And I say, well, I'm going to need 4 months to do that. They say, okay, you got 3, I'll be back. And that's how the insurance company works. So the insurance company is the federal government, and they basically federally insure all of the student debt, because otherwise the banks wouldn't loan them any money. Therefore, when you cancel student debt, you're not going to make the bank not pay, lose out on that money. What you're doing is the federal government is going to pay the bank for your loan. That's how it works.
Okay.
That's crazy. That's absolutely crazy. We're being sold these shiny little objects that
to a student. That, remember that text I sent you about this kid that was like, he's actually suicidal because they cannot afford to live their life with this crushing student debt.
Yeah, they shouldn't have taken it. They shouldn't have taken the debt, man. You don't.
But they had to.
Why? Why?
They were in a line of work that cost them a lot in education.
What do you mean?
They had to get a certain degree.
What's the line of work?
I think it was something in the health field.
Something in the health field, and they had to get an education to. I don't understand. Can you explain that more?
I'd have to revisit the text, but there's been many instances of students coming into this world looking for a job, their first job, and they come to the job with incredible debt, and it puts a lot of pressure on society.
Yeah,
it's actually bad.
I think it's terrible. I think it's very bad for the world, and I think that what kids need to do is stop feeding into the system. The more the banks loan these kids money, the higher the tuition goes. Over and over and over. Oh yeah, the more money the banks give the kids to go to school, the higher the tuition. Over and over and over. So what the kids need to do is say, I'm not borrowing any money. I'm going to go to a state school. I'm going to go to a public school. I'm going to go to YouTube University. I'm going to do whatever else I got to do. Or they can do what I do, is take 6 years to graduate from undergraduate school by working all day and going to school at night. There's other choices. I think there are kids that I know, kids of my friends, who are going to $75,000 a year schools that their parents can't afford a dime for. And they're borrowing money. They could go to a different school that's only $20,000 or $15,000 a year. But they're choosing these incredibly expensive schools. If I can afford $30,000 for a car, I'm personally going to go and buy a $20,000 car. I'm not going to buy a $160,000 car.
Yeah, but the price of education has gotten higher and higher too.
And that's because the banks keep on loaning money to these kids to go to these schools, which is what's making the price continue to go up. If the banks stop loaning money, the tuition prices would drop precipitously immediately.
But how would the bank stop loaning money?
By the federal government saying we're no longer insuring. That's that's a step that needs to be taken. Not relieving people of their student debt. That's insanity. That's a taxpayer just paying for even more money. People are paying $50,000, 54% of their income in taxes.
Yeah, they should be paying 80. We talked about this since the 80s, basically. Before the 80s.
Well, if I had to pay 80% of my income in taxes, I'd have to move. I'd lose everything. But it's not a question of good move. I know that maybe you resent that I live in well or something, but why would you want to say, good move? But if I move, who's going to buy the place?
I'll tell you why.
Somebody else who can't afford it. No, I'm asking you, who would I sell the place to under those circumstances?
I don't know what you're talking about.
No, listen, answer this specific question.
You listen to me.
No, wait. If income taxes if I had to pay 80% taxes, just answer this one, because you're not answering any of your questions. If I had to pay 80% income tax instead of 54%, I wouldn't be able to afford to live here. So who on earth is going to be able to afford to live here? Nobody. What happens is the value of the place then goes down. I have to sell it for 50% less than I paid. That puts me in a very compromised situation, because then I can't pay the bank. Okay. And then what happens is the asset values fall. The way that we determine property taxes are with real estate appraisals. And then the real estate appraisal office and the city of Denver, in this particular case, starts to get less property tax revenue because the asset values fell.
Oh, man.
You're not understanding
Enrique,
that? It's simple.
God bless you. You're got a way of explaining things that is very sophisticated, but ultimately it's just words running around. You're trying to run around the problem. Basically,
I actually gave 4 actual solutions, real solutions to the problems, not fake solutions that Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders are proposing.
Can I say one fucking thing?
Yeah.
In the 50s, the highest marginal tax rates were in the 80s and 90s, right? We were doing fine as a country back then.
No, I got to pull up what the 50s were like. Race riots.
No, 50s. I'm not talking about race. I'm talking about taxes.
Economic strife, poverty. Come on. I'm going to pull up the 1950s. Hold on a second.
Wait, hold on. There was much less income inequality in the 50s. It only started with fucking Reagan cutting taxes on corporation. Oh, here you go. Start Googling stuff. All right, whatever. It started in the 80s. That's when the wealth inequality started really hitting. And you can look that up if you want. Before that, there was much less, and that's because tax rates were much higher. The trickle-down shit that started with Reagan never worked, and it's still not working. And if you want to use technical terms, the word that they use to check that it's called multi-factor productivity. You ever hear about this? The measure of technical progress. And it's risen only half as much since 1980 as it did in the previous era.
No, according to Ray Kurzweil's book called Singularity, that is the opposite of the truth, what you just said.
Well,
we used it hold on one second. From 19... Huh?
I'm going to show you the New York Times article that it's quoted from.
Okay, so here's some information. Okay, Politico, there's a Politico story, the top tax rate beginning on that dark day in 1913 when the income tax was adopted. It started very low, then jumped dramatically during the horrible presidency of Woodrow Wilson, followed by a big reduction during the wonderful presidency of Calvin Coolidge. Then it jumped again during the awful presidencies of Herbert Hoover, Franklin Roosevelt. The rate stayed high in the 1950s before the Kennedy tax cuts and the Reagan tax cuts. So it started with Kennedy. which were followed by some less dramatic changes under George Bush, Bill Clinton, then George Bush, and then Barack Obama. What we do know about the impact of the high tax rates put in place by Hoover and Roosevelt, we know that in the 1930s were an awful period of the economy. We know that the 1940s were dominated by World War II, and we know that the 1950s was a period of tepid growth. The 1950s had very, very tepid growth. Our GDP was growing at something like 0.25% a year compared to 4% right now. We also know that in the high tax rate situations, that they don't result in higher revenues. There's Hauser's Law. Are you familiar with Hauser's Law?
No.
All right. I'm gonna just. It's gonna take too long to read that. But we've got to look that up later. Highly productive taxpayers have 3 ways to minimize and/or eliminate punitive taxes. First, they can simply choose to live a more relaxed life by reducing the level of work, saving, and investment. Second, they can engage in tax evasion. Third, they can practice tax avoidance, which is remarkably simple for people who have control over the timing, level, and composition of their income. All these factors mean that there are not linear relationships between tax rates and tax revenue. Okay, that's called the Laffer curve, L-A-F-F-E-R. That is about the correlation between tax rates and tax revenue. They don't change. If you take the poverty rate in the 1930s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, zeros, and then tens. If you take the average poverty rate taken over each decade, it has been basically exactly the same for the last 90 years.
Okay.
90 years, and that's with the tax rate vacillating up and down tremendously. If you go back and look at the income tax data from the 1960s as a place to start, the top tax rate was 91%. There were 8 human beings in the United States, that's it, that paid a 91% tax rate. There was an article by David Lionheart of the New York Times who basically recently said something about all this. And it was actually, he wrote an article specifically to make your point and ended up making my point. And if you read that, you'll see that. And that's basically how this whole thing works, man. 90 years, taking the average of every single decade with tax rates going all over the place, poverty rate has remained exactly the same. And I'll tell you why I think that is. And now I'm not speaking as an expert. I'm just speaking as just a regular guy who's just trying to think of a hypothesis.
But see, when
I think, wait.
Regular guy, wait, I just want to, can I say something for a change? Like, for example, you talked to me the other day, you were like, I'm walking down the street, Denver, I'm seeing all these buildings, I'm seeing this used to be a cow town, you know, and I was like, wow, you know, he's really talking from experience. So I said, I'm going to look it up. How is Denver doing? Denver in 2000 had 44 neighborhoods that were considered high poverty. By 2015, it was 111, 3 times. So between 2000 and 2015, the number of neighborhoods that are considered high poverty tripled. Now, your experience walking down the street.
Yeah, send me that. Send me that article.
I'm watching the economy boom. And if you really want to make in this economy, you better shake that booty and get to work, because that's what separates the winners from the losers.
No, I'm not.
That's a little bit different than that.
That's not what I'm saying. I say
people in poverty.
What I'm saying is
eat, go to work, live, take care of their health. That's another thing we never even spoke about.
Yeah, let's talk about the $35 billion a year in the United States spent on alcohol consumption. Let's talk about that and how that translates into the poverty spectrum. What your business
You know, instead of worrying about poor people getting drunk because they got to make it through another cold night in the fucking shelters, let's worry about fucking Enron, and let's worry about
Enron does not
Apple
exist.
and fucking Amazon not paying any federal taxes, and all these companies that are bilking us for billions instead of the guy that needs a little pint of hooch to get to sleep at night. That's who you focus on.
I'm saying $35 billion a year spent on alcohol. That directly correlates.
$1 trillion a year hiding tax money. I mean, whatever.
But if you think about it, that each person, I always make a joke. I said, I bought my first house with the money I didn't spend on beer. And I got to tell you, that's actually true. I bought my first house with the money I did not spend on beer. Period. And you quote me on that because I just said it. And that's how a lot of these things work. I think that there is a lot of problems. I think that people need to be given more opportunity. But again, I think that we need equal opportunity, not equal outcome.
We need equal opportunity for people.
Yeah, exactly. But not equal outcome. And so I am extremely sensitive. There's one guy that there's a whole bunch of people, because I work with the homeless here in Denver on a regular basis. And I work with them and I try to kind of tutor them into figuring out ways of them to develop a system where they can actually create a storage of wealth, for example. And it might be $1, it might be $10, and so on and so forth. But one of my first goals is to get them to open up bank accounts. And they had consistently I hear, oh, you can't do that because they charge you fees. And if I do this and I do that, I said, look, you don't get charged fees. You got to go to a credit union. You got credit unions are for starting out. And some people just use them indefinitely. And then you start using national or commercial banks when you get to the point where you need leverage in order to borrow money. You're not looking to borrow money. Just get a credit union that charges you no fees whatsoever and maintain that account responsibly and then store stuff. It's incredible. 1 out of 20 people listen. Okay? And out of the 1 out of 20 people that do listen, probably 1 out of 10 of them really get their shit together. And eventually they move into a place and they start actually. There's one guy who I started with. His name is Elijah. I'm not going to say his last name because I don't want to put him on blast on national, on worldwide YouTube. But this guy started four and a half years ago. And he actually really took an interest. He used to be an actor, okay? And he actually was kind of a well-known actor. A little bit, did TV and shit. But he
Lord of the Rings, right?
No. I'm not going to say. But he got messed up. He got into drugs, and he got into drinking. He drank himself, lost his house, lost his whole thing. He's no longer acting. You don't hear from him. He shows up in those searches when it says, "Where are they now?" It's everything. So anyway, this guy's smart. He ended up really taking an interest in the stock market. So first he went and he opened up a credit union. And then I started saying, look, start investing. You got a little bit of money. I'm going to show you how to do some things. And I would go every 2 weeks. I'd always find them at the public library because that's where he was on the computer. He'd be there from the minute that place opened until the minute the place closed. I'm going to tell you right now, this guy has about $600,000 net worth in a TD Ameritrade account. He's still homeless. He says, I don't want to waste any money on rent because I know that if I spend money on rent, then I can't put it to this. And then it costs me not just the rent, but it costs me the money I can make off of that money. And he's going to the thing, he's going to the, he's got a $120 a month membership at the health club. He showers, he's got a freaking couple of bags of clothes. He goes to the laundromat and cleans them. Still homeless. Guy's got $631,000 last I checked. And It's incredible, but it's like a very small group of people actually go. And I've tried my best. Like I said, it's 1 out of 20. And then of the 1 out of 20 that follows something, it's 1 out of 10 of those. Whoops.
I'm glad that you're helping people. I mean, look, that's fantastic.
I think that I'm going to help this guy become a mega multimillionaire. He's going to do well because the dude is the second that library opens to the second it closes. And now, actually, last I talked to him, he's going to go and he's going to get himself into one of these work, what do you call it? Workspaces. Get one of these little offices for $90 a month. So he's, and he's going to do all that. Anyway, I have to go now because I have a meeting starting in 15 minutes and I still got to get there. So thank you. Do you want to say what you want to say as the closing statements, please?
I just want people that are suffering right now through this economy to be given some opportunities that we've been given, the ability to like people whose fathers have been put in jail, like so many fathers of these kids in the projects, their fathers have been incarcerated by this system, and I think it's not only that, but we've been incarcerated by this system, and I just want, forget it.
No, I think you're right. I think that the prison system needs to be completely reformed. I think that we need to completely change what we're doing with that. There's no question. I think I think a lot of changes need to be made. And what we need to do is just make the good changes in order to actually have a positive result and not make bad changes. And that's all I want to do because I'm very interested in equal opportunity. And I think that we don't quite have equal opportunity right now. I think we have more equal opportunity now than any other place in the world. However, we don't have equal opportunity. I think we're close. And that's what we need to strive for. But we cannot have equal outcome because that would be disastrous.
Nobody's outcome. That's a red herring.
Right. I know. And we can't have people have like a wealth tax that they can't even earn enough money in a year to pay the wealth tax. We can't deteriorate and erode asset values because that's exactly what correlates with borrowing money from a bank. We can't have those things, and then which means that you take that money that you borrowed from a bank and then you build businesses and employ people.
What we have is the exact opposite. We just had corporate tax cuts that give these corporations billions of dollars. Even Jamie Dimon thought it was a bad idea. I mean, come on, you got to draw the line somewhere.
No, I draw the line. I think that the corporate tax cuts have, I think that they don't need to be where they are right now. I think that they should be a little bit higher. There is a cause and effect every time you make it, you make a change. The biggest problem with the corporate tax cuts right now is that they're not going into investing and into infrastructure projects. They're not doing that. They're just being stored, and they are being used, as you said in another conversation, they're being used to do stock buybacks, which does also help all the employees there that also own stock, but at the same time, it does. However, that's not necessarily so. Yeah, I think that the corporate tax rate, can be examined. I don't know where the right spot is. I don't know that. But wherever the right spot is, it needs to be examined. It needs to be moved into the right spot. There's a lot of things that can be done, but you don't charge wealth taxes. I already have this little thing in the restaurants. We have to pay a property tax for all of the equipment in the restaurants and the hotels. We have to pay a property tax for all the equipment that we already pay tax on. Can you imagine? That figure is heartbreaking. Sometimes that figure is 50% of all the profit that the company makes. It's really bad. And that's what this is looking at doing. Taking a tax on your entire, all your assets, just like the restaurants. You don't have that in New York, so you haven't felt that. I wish you did, because if you felt what it's like to have somebody says, okay, this dishwasher, it's 2 years old, it's worth $1,100, you got to give us $100. This washing machine, this refrigerator, this, and walk around the oven and the bar and this, and walk around your whole place and actually charge you money for every single thing that you already own in that restaurant. If you had that experience, you would then be closer to understanding what I'm talking about, because you would be like, hey, wait a minute, what is going on? And they're not doing that to people worth $50 million. They're doing that to people who own anything at all. They don't care how little money you make. They don't care the fact that you haven't taken a paycheck in 2 years. They don't give a shit if you got to pay this tax or go out and borrow the money. That's the attitude. So
man, you've got a lot of anger at the tax man.
No, I don't have anger. It's just fact. I'm just giving you information. I think that if we're not careful, these guys could really be extremely destructive, because they are not making proposals that are well thought out and salient. Again, Elizabeth Warren
as if Trump is, or what?
Oh no, Trump is no good. I don't like Trump.
So I mean, like, or Bush or Clinton or any of these fuckers, they've all been on the side of corporations.
I don't want to, because then this thing is going to be one of those 4-hour podcasts and I do have to go. But I can talk about, anything you want, but right now we're talking about the candidates going back. I mean, I could certainly do an analysis on Bill Clinton, and we could do a 3-hour thing just on him. But we can't keep on skating all over the place, because we're not going to be able to get.
It's not skating all over the place. It's simply saying, for the first time, we've got someone coming from the left who's going to actually help the middle class and charge the fuck out of corporations.
I think that what that guy's going to do is hurt everybody. That's what that's the point of what I'm saying. I don't think he's going to help the poor. I've given a lot of examples of how the system is going to be very badly injured by these people. I think that they're telling people that they want to help, but that's not what they want to do. I do not believe it. And I don't think that they're so ignorant that
they're evil people.
I think that they Elizabeth Warren is, I think, in my opinion, a lot smarter than Bernie Sanders. And I know she knows what she's doing. And so she's
deliberately defrauding them.
Definitely, yeah. Because there's no way she doesn't know what the cause and consequence of the things that she's saying are going to have on people. There's no way she can't know that. I just can't imagine. She's a Harvard professor teaching extremely privileged kids how to get out of debt by using the bankruptcy laws to their advantage. She didn't teach at a community college doing that. She did it for $400,000 a year. And last year she made $910,000 of income. She paid a 25.4% tax rate. Her tax returns are right on the internet. You can see them by Googling and taking a look at it. She made more money than I did, and I paid a significantly higher tax rate than she did. So,
and that makes you angry.
No, it doesn't make me angry. It just makes me pointing out the fact that I don't think that these people really have anybody's best interest in mind. She's got a $10 million net worth. When Bernie Sanders said, no, we're going to charge a tax on $10 million, she got up there and she said, no, not 10 million. Because she doesn't expect to get to $50 million within the 4 years or 8 years that she'd be president anyway. It's
that's a really cynical take on it, though, isn't it?
I don't know if it's cynical. It's just, it is what it is.
So it hit her income level. She said no when I raised it.
Well, it seems like that. That's her net worth. All right, Ben, we're saying goodbye right now. We can always have another one, but I'm actually going to call you on the phone as I'm walking somewhere, because I do. Just hang on one second.